emoji, and that way I can see that it's a question. And if it's a question you really want answered, you can hit that Q emoji again so that I can see that multiple people are hoping to see that question answered. For the most part, I will move through questions in chronological order. So the earlier you ask your questions of Aysha, the more likely you are to get them answered. I think that is it. Any questions before we begin, Aysha?
I don't think so.
All right. Let's get Craig in here as our backup recording and get the number already. All right. Okay, ready to start. So like I said, once I ask you what you're having for lunch, that's a cue that it has officially begun. Here we go. Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today we're talking with Aysha U, Farah about narrative in motion.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
Welcome all to our live magical podcast, in which we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. As always, I'm your host here, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster at the Indie Game Academy, and joining me today is Aysha U. Farah. Aysha is the former narrative lead at Deck9 Games and is currently a narrative contractor and narrative writer. And today we're going to be talking about narrative in motion. Welcome to the show, Aysha. What are you having for lunch today?
Well, I've got some chicken. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. I think it depends how lazy I'm feeling after I'm done with this.
Indeed.
Well, I'm going to eat it probably, but...
Okay. What are the other options then, if eating is just one option?
Well, yesterday I made a Caesar salad with chicken, and I had to throw out most of it because my cat immediately put both his feet in it to grab chicken out of it. So I failed.
My cat is like 10 or 11 now. He's a near and dear friend who's been one of my closest companions my whole life. And most of his life, he's been very good about not stealing food, but he has gotten worse and worse as he's gotten older. And he is now such a little jerk about it. Like, I cannot stop him from stealing food anymore.
Yeah, I thought that my cats didn't steal food, but I think they just wait until I'm gone to do it. Because the other night I went up to bed, I turned all the lights off. So they were like, okay, time to party. Mom is gone. And I forgot something. So I came back down and turned the light on. One of the cats was in the sink and the other was licking the pan on the stove. So they literally waited 30 seconds and then started going crazy. So I don't know what they're doing when I'm not there. They could be doing anything. It's like Toy Story or whatever.
Yeah, I can't leave food around, even in a closed container anywhere, or Fez will get up in it. It is a whole thing. Although that's also why you might agree. I don't know. This is a question for you. This is also why I love cats, though, because they are little jerks, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, I love my cats. They're the lights of my life. So I just don't want them to get sick. I don't mind if they eat chicken. I don't know what's on that chicken.
Indeed, it's all for them. Well, welcome to the show, Aysha. It's a pleasure to have you on here today. As always, we love to start with our origin story here. So can you tell us about where you are in the industry now and how you got there?
So I was a narrative lead at Deck9 Games until about last December, when I was laid off with like everybody else at the studio. Before that, I was a writer on Life is Strange Double Exposure, which came out last year too, in the grand tradition of releasing a game and then immediately laying everybody off. Right now I'm just working freelance, but for origin stories, I always have to, every single interview I do, I always have to ask this question. Do you know what Homestuck is?
I don't know what Homestuck is. Can you enlighten us?
Okay, well, maybe some people in the audience do. It's like a webcomic from 2009. It ran through the 2010s.
I'm going to Google it.
And let me tell you about Homestuck. And it's like kind of a niche, like cult classic sort of, and it has a huge following Smaller now, but I got hired by the guy who wrote it, Andrew Hussey, to write and direct a couple of his games. So I've worked on those, and that's kind of how I broke in. I had never written for games before. I didn't know anything. I was like a short story writer. I was going to be a novelist back in like my 20s. And sort of this just happened like by accident. And now it's my career. So, oh yeah, somebody put Homestuck in. Oh no, you did. All right, perfect.
For those curious,
everybody
Homestuck
read
is
the
out in the chat. Yeah.
the Wikipedia page on Homestuck.
Where else do you learn?
So I basically just learned kind of on the fly, just kind of having to Google all the things people were telling me. And I kind of came at it sideways because I started on like a tiny indie property where I was being paid like nothing, but there was like a ravenous fandom. So I got really used to fan backlash and like, just people being very, very dedicated.
Dealing with humans, I think is the term.
Right. So so I eventually I was like, I need to get a real job because I do not get paid enough for this. So I applied to Deck 9 and started there in like 2021. And was there until late last year. And now I am working as a narrative consultant and freelance writer, most specifically for a European company called Nekki, making an action shooter called Spine.
Oh, cool.
Which I think just was demoed at the Summer Games Fest, but I wasn't there, so I don't know.
That's great. I am curious. So the people on this show are generally either actively trying to break in or actively trying to found their own studios. It's just sort of the big two groups. Those who are trying to figure out how to break in, their first question is always, how did you land that first opportunity? So working on this webcomic, which, first of all, super interesting origin story. Haven't heard this one before. How did you make that very first connection? How did you wind up getting pulled onto these games?
I mean, literally just, I was really like luck, like honestly, like I knew somebody who knew somebody, which is like, I think really like people, I think that game devs don't like to talk about this because it, because nobody likes to be like, I got my job from luck and knowing a guy. But I think like half the time it's like, you just need to make sure you have the skills to back up the job once you get it, so you don't like wash out. But so much is knowing people. And I think that is also a skill, like being able to talk to people, being able to like stick in somebody's mind. So when someone's like, oh, I need a writer, do you know anybody? They're like, oh yeah, I know somebody. And that is how so many people break in. I think actually Deck 9, I didn't know anybody there, and I just kind of cold applied, and I got that job, which is, I think I have found increasingly rare in the industry.
Yeah, it's very true. It's something that we hear often enough, that we know it to be true. So many people get their first jobs, myself included, because they happen to know somebody. I got lucky. I got the what's it called? I got a brother to help me, and that was the person that I knew. So I did very little networking. I just had somebody who'd already done the work for me. Thank you, Eli. I love you. That was my very first job. But even after that, even after the luck of having that and the privilege of having that, basically every single job after that was because I knew somebody, or because I ran into somebody, or because like the most recent job that I had is because they saw a post of mine that went viral. It's all like super random things like that. It's not like, well, I did these 6 steps that you can do too, and like that led to the job. It's much more so like it's all a wash, and we're really a pretty small industry for that matter. And when somebody remembers who you are and they need that kind of person, they might just reach out.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest piece of advice is honestly not very helpful because it involves having a lot of money and being, able to come to the US. But going to GDC, I think is like hugely beneficial. And there's like, I went to my first GDC in last March, and or this March, the most recent March, whenever that was. It's like June now for some reason. And I was only able to go because I did the Amplifying New Voices scholarship, and they like give you a full, because that shit costs like $2,000, which is insane.
Yeah.
But even if you can't get one of those scholarships, and even if you can't go to the talks, just being in the area, like doing BarCon or whatever they call it, you can meet so many people, and almost everybody I met there was absolutely lovely. Like, people talk about GDC like it's Nom, but like in my experience, everybody there was just like extremely excited to talk to you, whether you are like, you know, Kojima or just some guy.
Yeah.
Like, everybody is very, very welcoming there.
I 100% agree with that one. I think I've said before, like, gamers, I think, can be a mixed bag. Like, people who play games can be a mixed bag as far as human beings. But I have found that like 90% of game devs are wonderful. They're all artists. They're all struggling. Those who don't struggle maybe can be a little bit worse. But like, for the most part, you know, we all have collective PTSD of working in this industry that can be so unforgiving. And so if you can find those places where game devs hang out, absolutely go and network in person. I adore GDC. I've been quite a few times myself. It is prohibitively expensive, but there are a number of avenues to get free tickets. And as you suggest, 100%, just go hang out in your Buena Park and just talk to randos. And you can do that for free as long as you can get to San Francisco and get 40% of the value of GDC just in that park.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some, and like, even I didn't actually go to that many talks, even though I should have, because I had like the free thing, but I just was like, I spent the whole time just like hanging out with people, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I mean, even if they're like there's probably game dev meetups in your city, like, or even in your like small weird town, because there's game dev meetups everywhere, which is like surprising to me. Like, I live in like sort of nowhere, North Carolina, and there's still people around here.
Yeah, that's definitely something to call out. And by the way, Rick is scolding me for thinking lowly of gamers. I love gamers too. I'm just saying gamers are more of a mixed bag. I think we can all agree with that. GameConfGuide.com is something that I've used before to find local events. I do think that I get the most like strongest connections when I go to things that are approximate to where I live, because those connections become longer term, more important, deeper connections.
Right.
So yeah, do your best to find some around you. And if you have literally none, there's still even a good amount of stuff like that online that you can still get a decent amount of value from. But
yeah,
let's move on. Let's talk about narrative in motion. So give me your 101 there. What are you hoping to talk about with the title Narrative in Motion?
So I mostly just have examples, because I always use examples to talk about things. It comes from like a philosophy background. So when we say narrative in motion, mostly what I mean is that like when a lot of people think about narrative, they think like cinematics, maybe like party banter, and like lore. But that's not really usually most games. That's not true. Like, the narrative is the design. And I think in order to make the best feeling game where like the story actually sticks with you, the narrative has to be reinforced by every part of the design. And I have a couple examples of this. The first is Hades, which is like in roguelikes in general, I think, when they come up with, because you have to come up with an explanation for why games are cyclic, like, you know, start over and over. So something like Returnal, Hades, Blueprints, even like Hades, he's trying to, for like the 1.4% of people who don't know what Hades is. If you've lived under a rock, it's the son of Hades trying to escape the underworld to the surface, and every time you die, you're like brought back down into the bottom of Hades, and you have to go out again. And it really reinforces this like frustration and sort of Sisyphean feeling of him trying to escape, and just being a player and getting your shit rocked like by some stupid little knight guy 4 screens in. You feel the frustration that Zagreus feels. And I think that is like a huge part of the game, because that game doesn't actually have a ton of story, right? I mean, it has a lot of dialogue, but it it doesn't have anything that's too complex, and it won a BAFTA for narrative. And I feel like a lot of that narrative is the experience of playing the game. It's not just people talking to you.
Yeah.
So that's one example. Yeah.
Yeah. To comment on that last point, somebody at some point was talking about Elden Ring's narrative, and Elden Ring has even less dialogue, and yet has even more atmospheric storytelling, environmental storytelling. Somebody said to me, Elden Ring tells story by vibes. And I thought that was very clever and cute. And
I have an Elden Ring
totally
podcast. I agree.
Yes. You walk into an area and there's a bunch of dead giants on poles, and you might never learn why they're there, but you definitely feel something. And I think that that's an undeniable truth of narrative.
All FromSoft games, you come in and you're like touching the ground, like something happened here. Oh no.
Or something's about to happen here. And that's when you walk very slowly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a Shakespeare play where like all the action happens off stage and you come in and you're like, oh, something fucked happened here. Sorry, am I allowed to swear? I'm sorry, I didn't ask you that.
We're a PG-13 podcast. Maybe I should make that a part of the intro. PG-13, so a couple swears, totally welcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So my second example is Pathologic and Pathologic 2, because that is a game about trying not to die of the plague. And one of the biggest mechanics in that game is not dying of the plague. So everything in that game, because you have, I don't know, a lot of people haven't played it because it's kind of niche, but like,
yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah. So it is a Russian game by Ice Pick Lodge. And it takes place in like a small Russian steppe village sometime in the 20th century. And you play as various doctors. They have different routes. And a plague has broken out, and you have to cure the plague or create a vaccine for the plague and try not to have all people in the town die. And you have like a hunger meter, an exhaustion meter, a infection meter, and time moves constantly. So things that you have to do will, if you have like somebody you need to go give antibiotics to, you have a certain period of time that you can do that in, or they'll die. So, and you're in this small town with like muggers running around who throw knives at you. There's plague clouds flying around, and you literally I would feel this like intense anxiety and distress just walking across town. And I would feel like this huge, like my heart would be pounding when I would like get to a building that's safe. And it felt literally so much like running from a disease. Like the whole game is supposed to make you feel like disempowered and afraid. I think H Bomber Guy did a really good video about how Pathologic plays and what it's about. Because the first game is not a fun game to play. It's very old, it's very janky, and it's kind of boring, but it's still like incredible. So much of that game is like just being stressed out. And part of it, I think, is I played it during the first month of lockdown because I'm like kind of a pervert, I guess. Like everybody was like crossing because it makes me feel better. And I'm like, I'm going to play a game. In March 2022, in March 2020. H Bomber Guy mentioned. Shout out to Harry wherever he is. It's a great video. So yeah, anything like a horror game should make you feel scared, and if it doesn't, then it's not doing its job. You should like feel, but like I don't think I've ever felt this sort of like oppressiveness from any game. And Pathologic is, again, like mostly atmosphere. Like there is some there is like dialogue, and it's very strange and adds to sort of oppressive atmosphere, but it is mostly mechanics that tell you the story.
Yeah. Interesting. So then what is your third example? You mentioned that you've got 3 for us.
So the third one is Alan Wake 2, which is a game that everybody who knows me is tired of hearing me talk about it because I'm totally obsessed with it, and I've played it like 4 times since it came out. I had never liked a Remedy game in my life. I didn't like Max Payne. I didn't like Control. I didn't like Alan Wake 1. I was a hater. And then Alan Wake 2 came out, and now I'm like, I will play everything the studio makes. I love them. Because that game, so I like Alan Wake is a game about a writer whose power, like, who connects with some like dark power that brings his books to life. And at the end of the first game, he gets stuck in this sort of like, basically the Black Lodge from Twin Peaks. He gets stuck in a place called the Dark Place, which is like this like sort of mindscape version of one of his books. It just is like a noir New York, and you're trying to get out of that place. But that game is exactly what it feels like to try to write a book. It is so well done in that, like, it's him trying to write his way out of this place. So he's like projecting his mind out while writing. And the way that the game, it's hard for me even to describe it. You just have to kind of like play it and understand for yourself. But it's this very like sort of cyclical thing where you go out, you try to make something work. It doesn't work. It all falls apart. He gets back. It's all like cycles and ending up back where you started, and everything sort of falling in and collapsing in on itself. And it just feels like writing a book. And I don't think I have ever come across something that so nails so well how it feels to try to make a piece of art and like not be able to. And it you can tell that the guy, Sam Lake, the guy who wrote it, because it took him like 10 years to write this game. And you can just feel it.
That's amazing.
So that game is I think like groundbreaking, and it kind of pisses me off that it was not a cultural reset like I think it should have been. I think it might be too weird.
It's hard to hit that wide audience when you like, that story sounds like one that any artist is going to relate to deeply. I haven't played Alan Wake 2, so this is making me realize that I have to remedy that situation.
It's so good.
Yeah. But that journey, the artist's journey, is so potent. And I got to tell y'all, no matter how far you get in your career or your lives, you'll keep being on that journey. And it's something that I think somebody who hasn't been in that arena might not be able to understand as well. So I do think it makes a little bit more sense to me that it might not have been as much of a cultural touchstone as one might hope.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a lot of live action cutscenes in it, which are weird. If you don't, if you've never seen anything like that before, it feels very strange at first. There's a musical number. There's a section where you just stand there and watch a 20-minute long Finnish experimental film. So like, it is pretty weird.
That's great. I love that. I have a game that I've mentioned a couple of times now that is just coming out now, is called Detective Dotson. Very small indie company called Masala Games that's actually an old mentor of mine, which is why I know it so well. And it's a detective story told from like true to life India. So you're really experiencing what it's like to be in India. And one of the things that endeared the game to me and has made me such an advocate for it is, in one of the very first levels, you're playing a detective game and there's cute detective things to do. And then you just wind up in a Bollywood dance. And it's a rhythm game all of a sudden, and it's wonderful. Yeah. And I love that kind of thing. All right, so these are three fantastic examples of narrative and narrative in motion, and sort of a flexible definition of narrative is, I feel like, part of what we're getting at here. I'm curious if you distilled this down to a nice YouTube short, what do you think that the core bullet points are to take away from these three games for somebody adding narrative to their game?
I think, well, the number one thing I always say is that the design and the narrative have to come at the same time. Like, and I think that lots and lots of games make a game and they're like, oh God, we need some writing in this game. So let's hire a writer at the end to like add some story. And that doesn't work. You can feel it when that happens. I think that a lot of games also, and this is a thing we constantly sort of had to fight at Deck 9. Because if you've played a Life is Strange game, then you know that the powers are very integrated into the story. Like, they're almost a metaphor for the emotional turmoil going on in the character's story. So we've had a situation where the design team wanted to change the powers. And we were like, okay, we can do that, but we have to completely rethink the character because she's going to be totally different if the powers are different, right? So like, I guess like having the bullet point for that is like design and narrative need to be talking to each other, even though half the time you're going to drive each other because like you each value different things and you're going to like step on each other's toes and everyone's going to have to apologize for yelling at each other in a meeting. But I think it's really important that and I feel like this is like it feels like sort of a dumb thing to say, like you to other departments while you make games, but it's weird how siloed teams can become. And if you're an indie studio, hopefully like you're more integrated than like a big studio would be. Because like some big studios, like narrative is in one location and the rest of the studio is in another location. And that makes it even harder. But I think that thinking of the design and the narrative as the same thing, I think is like, this is the same thing. And however you achieve the effect of the narrative, whether it's through talking or no talking at all, like there can be games that have hardly any speaking in them and still have a very strong narrative, but you need to be integrating those, the story into the systems, I think, from the beginning.
Yeah, that one it's interesting. So because of what we do here, I work with a ton of juniors. I work with a ton of people who are working on some of their very first games. And something that's nice about that is I get such a glimpse into sort of the like meta level of the game developer, like how game developer brains work, especially at that early stage of the process. And I think a lot of us come into it wanting to tell our stories and wanting to tell our perspectives and wanting to use games as our artistic medium to deliver these stories that we feel so important in telling. And I think something that naturally comes with that is a conflict of your version of the story. You have something that you really want to incorporate in this game that you think is really important, and somebody else has something that might not even clash, but is just hard to tell alongside, what you're trying to tell. I had like an old mentor, Will Shen, the guy who wrote "Oh, You're Finally Awake" in Skyrim, which is I fanboyed like crazy when I learned that he was the one who wrote that. He said, "Game developers are artists, and artists are trouble," and I think like that's beautiful and simple and true. So when people first enter game dev, I think they have a really hard time with creative collaboration because it's frankly a difficult thing. It's hard to work together to create something cohesively beautiful that you all care about. But it is also the sauce. Figuring out how to work together and tell both of your stories in one cohesive experience absolutely is the sauce, and it's part of why working together with a diverse set of folks is so potent on a game. So I'm wholeheartedly agreeing with you. It is like the best I'm mostly a gameplay designer. It's the best experience in the world when I have like a good narrative person to sit down and shoot the shit with and be like, "Oh, wouldn't this be cool?" And it's the best experience to have that same person in multiple departments too. Having even like a good project manager, like even somebody who's not, air quotes here, creative, to do the same sort of thing where you're just excited to tell the story together and you're both willing to concede and like find the appropriate path forward is amazing.
Yeah, I would also say like, and I feel like that this can happen in indie studios when everybody is sort of like, if you have like a co-op situation or like it's a bunch of friends making a game, somebody needs to be in charge. If not in charge, if not like the boss, then somebody needs to be the final decision maker, or no decision will ever get made. And you can take turns being that. You can draw straws. You can, random number generator of who's going to be the boss in this meeting.
That'd be
but
interesting.
Somebody has to be able to say, enough. We're doing this. Thank you for your input. I think a big part of being a lead is sort of like being the person who is responsible for the mistakes or responsible for the decisions. Which is a separate skill set than being a writer, which is another thing that I think I feel like needs to, because like there's, after a certain point, the only way to progress in your career can be becoming a manager, and not everyone is cut out for that. There's lots of people who are incredible writers but terrible leads.
Yeah. Wow. So I mean, I love that one. It's a difficult journey. And it is at some point I feel like you kind of just realize, oh, nobody's making the decision. I need to step up and make the decision then. Or somebody does. And it's very, very true. So here's my continuation of this conversation then. My question for you. I wholeheartedly agree with the concept of marrying gameplay to narrative. Can you give us some of the ways that we might do that? So some of our actionable implementations of this concept.
Yeah, so I think that like so many of these are so like vague because I tend to be a pretty like just brainstormer kind of person instead of like, here, let's make a chart kind of thing. So I think that, like I said before, you want to create, when you create your system, you create your narrative. I think also it's important to decide like what your game specifically is trying to do, and then write a narrative that goes along with it. Because there's lots of situations like, this is too complicated, it needs to be simplified. I think simplify is my advice to everybody is like sitting down saying, what do I want people to like what do I want people to feel? What do I want people to know? And how comfortable am I with some people not understanding? Because there's always going to be like, and this is a thing that feedback you'll get from publishers a lot, which is like, this is not coming, like some testers were confused. Can you put in a line of dialogue explaining this? And often I'm like, no, I don't want to, because there's always going to be a chunk of people who are not going to understand the story, which is just, I think that you have to decide like what you want people to feel, what you want them to know, and how you want them to know it. And then I think you have to write and design the game to go with those principles and sort of not, and sort of have the sort of stomach to realize that not everyone is going to get it. And if like 50% of people are getting it, then you've been successful.
Yeah, I think for this specific point, I think there's just different types of players out there, and there's some people that like narrative just isn't that important to them, or they don't need to get it, and so they don't actively like consciously seek the narrative, and so they're less likely to get it. There's also something to be said for like how much more satisfying it is to wonder about the narrative. It's interesting. This is a bit of a strange correlation, but this is actually making me think of the tactic when creating social media content of intentionally leaving out information. It's tempting to be like, here's exactly what I think and exactly how exactly how I'm going to handle this, and like here's a problem that there could be with this post or whatever concept I'm introducing, and I already know about the problem. But you actually like get better engagement on your posts if you just allow people to point out the problems with your theories. And it's kind of similar with narrative. Yeah, bait. It's kind of similar with narrative though in games. I think like explaining every little detail, making sure every player understands every little thing is actually a weaker narrative in a lot of cases. It's more satisfying when you play an Elden Ring to be like, what the hell is this field full of giants? And allow the player to fill that space with their own creative direction and then maybe eventually figure out what you were thinking.
It's like the journalist who jokingly asked the Disco Elysium writer, "Why can't I kiss Kim Kitsuragi?" And the writer responded, "Because something like the most intense desires are the ones that remain or something like that."
Ooh, spicy.
I know.
That's great.
So yeah. So I think that's not really like I don't really have like a step-by-step, like foolproof. Here's like 6 steps you can do to make sure your narrative like fills out correctly. Because there is really like, I don't know, you don't really ever learn how to make a game. You kind of, if you're lucky, sometimes you don't. And the publisher is just like, we need this game to be out by time, and then you end up with Cyberpunk 77 problem, or something like that, or like Prey, the new Prey, both of which are wonderful games, but got shoved out way earlier than they should have been.
Yeah. The modern gaming.
So, right, and I think of also another. This is not really related to like narrative design, but there is, I think, and this is a thing that every needs to understand and be able to accept that it's got to be done eventually, and done is better. Done is better than perfect. Sometimes done is even better than good.
I've been using this one a lot lately, so I love that you brought it up. Quote from my mom, who worked in theater and was a theater director for a long time, and then eventually a theater professor. One of my favorite quotes for all artists of any form: "Done is beautiful. Stop getting stuck in making your game perfect. That's why you spent 4 years on your 6-month project. Just finish the damn thing and get it out there. And by the way, you're going to get so much better feedback once people are playing it anyway."
Right.
Yeah.
I see people who will post things like, well, I want to write a book, but like I'm such a perfectionist and I just can't stand to like not have it be perfect. And that to me is just hubris. It's like, shut up. No, I don't care how perfect it is in your brain. It's not real. It doesn't exist. I don't care about it. You put it on the page and then we'll talk.
Yes, there's the Brene Brown quote. I'm not interested in hearing the opinions of those who are not in the arena too. It's very true. Like until you actually try it, until you actually put it out there, it's all a lie. And stop lying to yourself and just make the damn thing. All right, I've taken enough of your time though. This has been a great conversation so far. It's time to jump into some community questions. So we have Rick asking the first question. Rick, would you like to ask about actionable narrative deliverables?
Yeah, so when you're working on a team, I'm curious what you find the most useful and actionable deliverables that you can give to your team that has the most impact.
You mean my narrative team giving to the rest of the team, or the rest of the team giving to me?
I guess you could go with both of it. Like what can you receive that is your best input that you can do the most with, and then how can you give an output back that gives you the best results when they take it?
So I think it depends on like what kind of game you're making. So at Deck 9, because we were a narrative first studio, most things came from us first. So we would come up with a concept for a scene, and we would hand it off to the rest of the studio to then get feedback on. But I think in general, like when you are like level design docs are always important, I think, like, and a level design doc that everybody can understand and is not like filled with sort of jargon that just if your artist looks at it, they're going to be like, what is this? Like, what does this mean? Also, I think that gray boxes are really, really important. So a big issue that I've had on games is when we were trying to write a scene in a space that we had no idea what it was going to look like. So we ended up having to go back in and realize that we did not have the sections of this that we thought we were going to have. I don't know if anybody here has played Double Exposure, but the bowling alley that ended up in the game does not look anything like I was imagining when I wrote that scene. So I think the sooner everybody can sort of get an idea of what something is going to look like, the better.
Okay, so you're saying deliverables that perhaps help flesh out what your vision is, and maybe they're tailored to the people who are receiving them, cutting out the extraneous information.
Yes, I think that's that's good advice. I think that a big problem we would always have is that we would come to read-throughs, like we would come to meetings to discuss the script, and like half the people in the meetings would not have read the script, and you can tell. So like my other advice is please read the script.
That's amazing that we have to ask that.
No, that's actually something that I think is really a good talking point, because I've noticed on teams that I work on, a lot of times, like the engineers, they learn what the story is when they're playing the game after it's been implemented.
Right.
So like how do you bridge that gap to where you can work with people who are busy with other things, and they will never they're busy managing all kinds of systems and all the magic in the background. They're engineers, and you guys have an equally complicated system handling all of these narrative threads and all of the plot lines, and you need to make sure that it turns into a cohesive experience that's married to those mechanics that the engineers put together. Like I guess like that's the bridge that I'm trying to understand. Like, what are the most useful deliverables to make sure that you seamlessly get into that state?
So I think that I think it depends. Like, there are literally, I have had to, from small indie projects, I've had to fire people who, like, artists who were not reading the script and were drawing stuff that was not in the scene. And like that is very frustrating. But then I know that there are people who are maybe like their whole thing is just lighting. And it's like, do the lighting people need to read the script and know what's going on? I think it really depends. And I think that having like maybe a narrative Bible or an outline or something, even if your narrative Bible can be huge too. So I don't want, like, we at Deck 9, we would have like 90-page narrative Bibles. So I would not want everybody that, like, please don't. But something that is maybe like, if narrative can provide like bullet points or provide overviews, or maybe have like a bi-weekly meeting every 2 weeks. Can never bi-weekly means, if it means twice a week or every 2 weeks, like a meeting every couple of weeks where anybody who is interested comes and the narrative can explain the story or talk about what new things have changed since, we last spoke. So I think the more that narrative is integrated into the rest of the studio, the better. And that sort of siloing, I think, is something that I've experienced a lot. And I think it comes from, I think it can come from both narrative and the rest of the studio. I think I have been where narrative seems to think that they're very important and that everybody else is important. And then there's people, everybody what to do. So I think that the more integrated and the more back and forth that you can have with the rest of the studio, the better.
This is one that happens to me as a game designer as well. I'll come into meetings and it's obvious nobody has read the design doc or whatever other piece of documentation I give out. And at some point, I think something that made a huge difference for me is just accepting that and knowing that there's going to be things missed. And so I'll intentionally make simpler versions of the same documents to try to make sure that people are at least come in with some understanding. So I, for one, have started writing design docs to be as absolute short as possible, that there's no need for extrapolation or extra information. I intentionally write my design docs with size 14 font to encourage me to keep them shorter and bullet pointed. I like making visual aids. So when I do quest design, for instance, I make beat cards so you can look at that on a single PDF and get the whole quest line. And something I've started doing recently actually is like 5-minute design overview videos. So I'll be like, all right, here's the design doc, people. Here's point A, point B, point C. And that way, like, at least they're coming in with an understanding, even if they didn't read the full, 15-page document or whatever.
Yeah, I firmly believe in having inter-team advocates, the person in one specific team, like on the narrative team, who it's their goal to understand what the engineers are going to need from them, and they do a distillation and a translation. So that way you don't have the person with the 40-page Google Doc saying, here you go, can't wait to see it in the game.
Yeah, engineers, why aren't you reading my 40-page doc?
It can be hard too, because a big thing that ended up happening towards the end of my time at Deck 9 was like, we would spend all of our time drafting documents for stakeholders because they didn't understand something. And I was like, I don't have time to do this. Like, I am trying to write the game and you just want me to keep PowerPoints. I need somebody to do this for me. Like,
amazing. All right.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that one. So next question is from Misha. Misha's asked me to read for them. Misha says, how do you balance narrative that is non-playable versus playable? And in terms of genre, would you agree that having variety is good? Like having some comedy, drama, romance all in one?
Yes. To both. I don't think the first one was a yes or no question. The first section was, how do you balance playable narrative and non-playable narrative.
Yep.
I think a lot of times it is budget, literally, because non-playable narrative tends to be expensive. Like the more like if you have a cinematic in the game, that is going to be the most expensive thing in the game probably, and that is going to be probably used very sparingly if it's an indie game, especially. Like so I guess non-playable narrative can also be like environmental storytelling, finding a book that like tells you lore about the place that you're in and stuff like that. So I think that you need a good balance, but as usual, I think it depends what kind of game you're making. Like there are some games that just don't have any like readable script like scattered around. And there's games that's narrative is entirely how a place looks. Like The Last of Us does a lot of that, like a lot of environmental storytelling. So I think it is usual. It's like budget, like scope and style, I think together. And the second is, I always think that having some sort of variety in what you're making can be good, especially like if something is like horror, like you need a moment to breathe, I guess. Like you don't want, because if you have like a constant, you want the emotional peaks to go up and down, basically. Yeah. So you want a moment that is funny or romantic, like stupid, to sort of like break up the tension. So when something bad does happen, and actually like you have somewhere to go emotionally. So I think having a little bit of humor in anything is good. Like I have trouble not making things, not to be like, oh, I'm so funny, I just can't stop being funny. But like I have a lot of like, I've had jobs, why are you making jokes? It's not a comedy. I'm like, because I'm bored otherwise. So I think that having some humor in what you're writing is.
Yeah, I think that's very true. One of my very favorite early game design lessons is the engagement curve, which is just imagining the level of intensity, engagement, or difficulty over time of your game. So you have your peaks and you have your valleys, and you can't have a valley if you just keep delivering the same content. If it's just horror, there's no way for you to break that for a moment and give the player a rest to make the next peak more intense. So it almost requires some variation.
Right. Like I was thinking about this in relation to like the original Silent Hill 2 and then the Silent Hill remake. And I feel like the tone of the original Silent Hill 2 is so much more like, because the voice acting is so funny, like you end up laughing, like something really intense happens and then what? Who? And then you're like, you feel like, haha, you like have like laugh, but it's like everybody's so good in the remake that like it's more stressful because like you never really have a chance to come down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would read an article about that. the difference between the two just because of the voice acting. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. I think we've got 2 more questions to go. Joker Vases says, when writing narrative, I think I know the answer to this one, by the way. When writing narrative, have you needed to change any part of it to stay in scope? If out of scope and the team wants to keep it for later, do you choose to shift it to DLC or sequel? Do you save it for later?
Yes. Like the first meeting that we would have with the directors would be, we would go through with the script, design, cinematics, art, would go through, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can do this, except we do it a little differently. Stuff like, can she wash her hands off screen? And usually like the answer is almost always yes. And 2, like my biggest like source of shame is that the first scene in Double Exposure I wrote, and also it was my first time writing for something for that studio, and I put a tarp on something that needs to be pulled down, and nobody stopped me. And to this day, that tarp haunts me because it was such a pain in the ass. And it looks good, but also it's impossible for that to look good. So like,
and it was probably a lot of work to get it pretty good.
Right. And I was tarp girl for the next 2 years. So I wish somebody had stopped me. So like, I think that in general, please feel free to go to your narrative team and be like, this is insane. We're not doing this. Or can we do this off screen? Can we fade to black for this? Is there some other way this can happen? Instead of revealing something by pulling a tarp off, can we turn a light on or something?
There you go.
So I think in general, I think, I don't know. I think it's maybe something about me. I don't know. I guess I'm intimidating. Maybe I'm quite tall, but people would be like, oh, I didn't like, I could do it. So I just didn't say anything. And I'm like, please say something. If it's not, if it's going to be too hard, too expensive, because I'm not an animator. Like I have some understanding of how it's like, I know that, you know, manipulating things with your fingers is hard, but sometimes there's stuff that just in my brain is going to be so easy. Like there's a scene in Double Exposure where Max walks over and grabs, she like reaches over the bar and grabs a glass and puts it down and pours a drink for herself. And it didn't even occur to me like that was good because I did it physically on a bar, but I am like 7 inches taller than Hannah Tell. So it was such a pain. And she kept knocking into the thing that eventually I was like, I wish I had.
I think I love that. So for anyone who hasn't worked professionally yet, like 70% of what you do will be creative problem solving for the sake of scope or somebody's well-being, sanity, well-being. And every department has its own version of creative problem solving. I think it's tempting to think of like your engineers as your problem solvers, but everybody has a form of this. So somebody might come to the design department and be like, is way too hard to do this mechanic that you want us to do. We can't figure this out. And you're going to come up with a new version of that mechanic that'll work instead, where you're going to be like, oh my God, we're 4 weeks behind. How do we cut this down and still make it fit the budget? And still make it fit the bill, really. What I mean by that is like still make it a satisfying, as good of an experience as we can. Huge part of game dev for everybody and for every department. And so much of your job becomes like, somebody realized that what I asked them to do is impossible for one reason or another, and I have to come up with a new version of it.
Yeah, you've gotta kill the auteur in your body if you're gonna do any sort of collaborative work. I mean, eventually, maybe when you're the Sam Lake or the Hideo Kojima of your studio,
you can just tell
you
everybody.
can be an auteur, but most of us can't afford that.
Yeah, and I think the creative work tends to be better for that reason. Actually, a lot of the most wonderful, interesting solutions to problems are exactly that. They were solutions to problems, and they wound up being wonderful additions to the game. All right, and Art, I'm going to ask for you since we are running out of time. Sorry there, Cece. So Art Muse says, how did collaborating with other departments look? Were parts of the narrative locked before other departments entered production? And how did you change the narrative as needed?
Yes. So I only have experience with collaborating with other departments in a sort of the phase of something that has not been announced yet and that I've been laid off from. So I don't know when I'm going to be able to talk about it, if ever. But like we were moving way too fast. So we were literally tracks while the train was hurtling down it. So I don't honestly know how to do it when you're not rushed and crunched. So I think it would be great to have people have eyes on everything before we've drafted it. But I think that often just everything needs to because until we write something, people can't start making it, right? So there were lots of times that, stuff just did not have time to filter down through everything. And I think that is a pretty common problem, especially in this day of layoffs, this day and age. But collaboration between departments, it was a lot of Zooming, like too many probably, which is another thing where like you need somebody to, that's just another little thing. Like somebody needs to be running the meeting and and like, let's make a decision before we have to come back in an hour and do this again. So, yeah, I think just budgeting your time, making sure everybody has time to get their eyes on stuff, ideally, but often the reality is just everybody's working at once on the same thing.
I can corroborate that. I think that that's pretty much game dev. It's all a soup, and the best of intentions go out the window almost always. I think you'll be like, oh, we got to have these things ready by now, and then somebody won't deliver, or something will be a problem, or you'll just be wrong. That happens a lot. And then you'll wind up just rolling with the punches as best you can. All right, we have reached the end of the episode. Before we say goodbye, there's two things we like to do here. So first of all, we like to assign some homework. So what is something that we can ask the audience to do in the next week? Take about an hour to practice some of what we talked about here today.
So I was thinking about this, and I feel like design a set piece or a level, just like on paper, or however you feel like doing it. Like if you want to program something, go for it. Where nobody talks. Yeah. Programming, whatever. That's okay. That's magic to me. That's magic to me.
Right.
I'm just a writer. I don't know anything. But like the idea of, it was not supposed to be disdain. It was the, why would you work this hard for something that I'm telling you to do? Like,
thank you, engineers. We love you.
Right. Yeah. No, you're perfect. We love you. Something where you're like a situation where like a level or a set piece where the getting across like the feeling and the information to the player without having anybody say any words, I think would be a cool thing to do.
That's great. Yeah. So homework assignment from this episode is simple, or perhaps not simple, is straightforward, we'll say. Come up with a message you're trying to convey, design a corner of a level or a location or a character, whatever feels right in this case, that can convey that emotion, can convey that message with zero text whatsoever, with zero dialogue whatsoever. That's a good one. All right. Before we say goodbye, is there anything you'd like to plug here at the end of the episode, Aysha, or anything that you would like to give us your final words?
Yeah. So I have a indie visual novel coming out hopefully this year, but we have a Steam page. It's called The Sky Left Us. It's a sci-fi sort of hybrid visual novel dating sim about like climate change, sort of. And yeah, if you want to wish list that really helps us. I have a podcast like that I mentioned, Elden Ring lore podcast, where people come on and explain Elden Ring to me because I don't know what's happening in that game. It's called All My Maidens, and I think we have like 4 episodes out so far. So if you want to check that out and listen to me be just like kind of be confused about stuff, like finding out that like people are having sex with dragons, stuff like that. I don't know that.
I will. We'll have we'll have links to The Sky Left Us and All My Maidens down below in the description. Amazing. Any last words of wisdom you want to give us before we say goodbye?
Play Alan Wake 2 and then come talk to me about it, because I love to talk about Alan Wake 2, and I'm running out of people in my friend group who want to hear me talk about it.
All right, so hit up Aysha U.
I'm on Blue Sky. That's where I
great.
Mostly am.
Go to Blue Sky.
Just my name, Aysha U Farah.
There you go. Go to Blue Sky. We'll link that down below as well. Go to Blue Sky and hit up Aysha and ask about Alan Wake 2. That's the real homework.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, it has been an awesome episode. Thank you, Aysha. This has been very eye-opening and just a lot of fun. I appreciate you giving us your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Of course. Thank you for those who asked questions. Thank you for those who are listening. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, we'll be here again next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, back in our Discord. There are links to join down below. And if you enjoyed, we ask that you send this along to just one other person who might enjoy it too. I think that's going to do it for the episode. It has been a true pleasure, everybody, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
I gotta get the outro bot. There we go. All right, bye. And to those watching the stream, we love you. Thank you. Actually, it was a great talk. Yeah, thank you. I can't see your name, LinkedIn user, but totally great talk. Thank you for the time and thank you for coming by. Goodbye, everybody.